I'll start with a very profound quote by Alexander Haile, who said, "A brand is the promise of an experience." Um, every great brand story starts with a promise of an experience. What the founders of the brand or what the creators of the brand want the consumers and the customers to experience. If we look at brand value, there are three dimensions to the brand value. So I'm going to start a little with the theory behind it before getting into actual strategy and actual experience that I derived from the industry. So there are three dimensions to brand value largely: functional value, emotional value, and social value. Which is basically what is the use of the brand, which is a functional value. How does using the brand make me feel, which is the emotional value. And because I'm using this particular brand, how are the others viewing me? That's a social value. So if we look at a typical example of a low involvement category, cement, uh, or any building material. So let's take an example of a cement. What is the functional value that this particular cement gives me? It is uniform, easy to mix, easy to apply. What is the emotional value that is derived out of using this particular brand of cement? I feel like a socially responsible person while I'm using this particular brand of cement because it is so sustainably. Is one of the emotional values that using a particular brand of cement can provide. What is the social value? I am using this particular brand of cement, so other people view me as somebody who is quality conscious. Quality conscious here is a trait that is being attributed to you, and it does not limit itself to cement or to building materials. They would see you using this particular brand of cement and think that you are quality conscious in everything that. So that's how brand value, especially social value, percolates. So if we have to look at how brands play around with these three values, which is functional value, social value, emotional value. I've just taken an example of two brands here. Not going to name any brands, but this is how they play around with. So uh, brand one is high on functional value, whereas they're not particularly focused on social value or emotional value. Although to some extent they also offer an emotional value. Whereas brand two, if you look at it, it is highly focused on emotional value, to some extent the social value as well. There is a functional value. Their focus is low. This does not particularly mean that the product or the brand is low on function or is low on quality. It just means that from a branding perspective, they are not focused on the functional value. It is very difficult for brands to focus on all three of these values at the same time. So each brand will have to pick and choose what they want to focus on, pick and choose what they want to be known. So far, we have been talking about the theory behind branding and how brands are made to a small extent. Uh, Now we will start talking about involvement and what is low involvement versus high involvement, how things work differently. Before that, we will just touch upon the consumer decision-making process. For the purpose of this talk, I'm going to use the terms consumer and customer interchangeably. While I do understand that they are not the same person, uh, for purposes of this talk, they largely remain similar, and whatever applies to a consumer will also apply to a customer to a very large extent. So, what is the decision-making process that gets followed when a purchase is being made? The very first step is need recognition, which is identifying that you have a need. This may be self or this may be induced. You understand that you have a need without somebody telling you that you have a need or without somebody nudging you towards that need. That is self identification of a need. You also have induced identification of need, which is you see something in the market or somebody using a particular item that you feel like you need to have because it fulfills a need that you did not know that you had, but you still had. Uh, Hidden needs are an example of this. It may also be that you see a particular item with somebody or in the market, and you understand that you can use that particular item for a need that you have, which may not be the intended need that the particular item hopes to solve. That is also possible. This is also an example of induced identification of a need. The next step is information search. Once you have identified that you have a need, you search for information on the different ways that you can satisfy the particular need. It may be true that there are multiple ways of satisfying the particular need. So which then forms into different brands that can satisfy the need. So this goes about it from a product out or a service out approach, wherein you have a particular need which may be solved by three different products or three different products plus two different services, and for each of those products and services you may have multiple brands. Once you do some level of information search, you then come to alternatives. Basis your search, you will then shortlist a bunch of alternatives that you will then pick from. This is a comparison between different products and brands. There may be certain brands which are eliminated from this particular step, as in they don't even make it to the evaluation of alternative step because of whatever reason. Maybe because the quality is so poor that you don't want to evaluate it, or the brand is not something that you support because of certain other things that they may be doing. All of these apart, you end up with a list of alternatives that you will then pick from. The next step is the selection, which is arriving at the brand of choice. So you look for information, then you shortlist a bunch of alternatives, then you finally end up selecting a particular brand and a particular product, obviously. The next is the purchase decision, which is the final purchase of the brand. This is you saying that this is the product or the brand I'm going to purchase. This is where I'm going to purchase it from, and this is when I'm going to purchase it. So your purchase may also be delayed. I'll give you an example. So I ended up buying a car 2 years back. I started the information search sometime in March. Ended up with evaluation of alternatives also sometime in March, April. I had already finalized which car I was going to buy by June. But my actual purchase happened in August, 2 months later, because of whatever reasons. So the purchase may be immediate or delayed. Delayed purchases usually happen in case the object or the need that you have does not need to be fulfilled immediately. It may also happen because of cost concerns. It may also happen because you are waiting for something new to come into the market. There are various reasons why your purchase decisions are delayed. The final step is the post-purchase evaluation, which is once you have purchased and used the brand, whether it fulfills the need to the fullest, is an evaluation that you do after all of this is completed. Now, coming to the very important topic, what is customer involvement? Customer involvement is the level of importance a consumer places on a brand during the decision-making process. So we saw the different steps involved in the decision-making. Involvement of a customer or a consumer is the level of importance a brand plays during the entire process. Some factors which are influencing customer involvement are personal relevance, product complexity, risk perception, etc. So if a particular product is very relevant to sell, then the customer involvement is very high. If it's a complex product, it may happen that the customer involvement is high or low depending on whether the work is outsourced to an influencer or not. Risk perception is also a very important factor here. If the risk perception is high, as in whether you risk to lose a lot if the purchase decision is wrong, influences customer involvement. So to give you an example, if I'm going to purchase a car that's worth 50 lakhs or 60 lakhs, and there is a risk that the car that I purchase at the end does not suit my needs completely. In that particular case, my involvement would be very high to ensure that the risk is sort of mitigated with the level of research that I do, with the level of information search that I do. One very important factor is customers limit their involvement when they're in. This is something that all marketers are aware of. This is something that all marketers are wary of to an extent, and something that they need to play around. So what happens in case of a low involvement category or a low involvement decision making? There is a need recognition. This stage does not change. The information search and evaluation of alternatives are absent. These stages do not apply to low involvement categories. Your selection and purchase decision do exist, but they are simplified. They are not as lengthy and drawn out as in case of something that is a high involvement category. So there is a general perception that price and involvement are directly correlated. That is, if something is high price, it is high involvement. This is not necessarily true. You have categories, you have brands which are low price, high involvement. You also have categories and brands which are high price, low involvement. So these are just some of the categories that I've plotted on a graph. So if you look at low involvement, low price items, these are daily groceries, packaged water, etc., where you don't spend a lot of time gathering information, you don't spend a lot of time evaluating the alternatives, etc. These are quite quick as a purchase process. On the other end, you have the high price, high involvement categories, luxury cars, state of the art tech, so flagship phones, high end laptops, all of these fall under these categories. Something peculiar is a low involvement, high price category. These are usually items which are heavily regulated in terms of quality, in terms of price, in terms of where it is available, etc. So prescription drugs, for example, even if the price is very high, your involvement is low because your alternatives available are minimal, or there is no perceived differentiation between the various alternatives that are available. You don't particularly care if the drug is coming from Lupin or Cipla or GSK or any other drug manufacturer. The other peculiar item is a high involvement but low price category. These are personal accessories, for example, personal care, for example, beauty items. They all fall under this category. Because of two reasons. They are either something that people see on you, or they are something that directly influence how you look when you are out in the public, and therefore the perception of. To give you an example, something like neckties. Um, it may cost you only about 500 to 1000 rupees, but there is a lot of involvement in picking the right color, the right fabric, etc. Because neckties are usually worn in occasions where how people perceive you is very important. Some of the other categories obviously I've plotted here: car accessories, shoes, alcobev, packaged food, etc. So why is branding important in low involvement categories? Or what is the role of branding in low involvement categories? The role of branding is to move your brand from a low involvement to a high involvement stage. Uh, so if I go back to the previous slide, if you look at packaged water or daily groceries, for example, can your brand of packaged water move from being a low involvement to a high involvement brand or category? Can you force your consumers to be more involved when they are purchasing packaged water? those are the kind of questions that branding seeks to answer in this case. And obviously, when you move from a low involvement to a high involvement stage, there is also a premium to be on. So your price would also move towards the right, which is toward from low to high. It will not obviously go from being a low price item to a very high price item. Those are again controlled by market dynamics. But there is a premium to be on when your brand moves from being a low involvement brand to a high involvement brand. Again, we come back to what are the values that make up brand value. We have functional value, emotional value, and social value. So, how do you increase each of these values in a low involvement category? How you increase the functional value are providing features that are exclusive to the brand or are complementary to their primary function. So again, taking the example of cement, uh, you come up with a cement that does not require plaster or paint. Suddenly, your consumers are highly involved in making those purchase decisions because they are gaining functional benefits that they are not gaining from other brands. How do you improve emotional value of your brand? You nurture communities and create spaces where your consumers can come and co-create. So an example is exclusive communities for users of your brand. Even if they are cement users, they are masons or masonry contractors. If you can create communities around them where you can provide them with training, you can provide them with exposure that other brands are not providing, then they end up, advocating for your brand. Similarly, if you can create communities around uh, homeowners who have used your brand and you showcase them in a magazine or in a talk show, for example, with their houses being the highlights, suddenly, the homeowners are interested in purchasing your product. How do you induce social value into a low involvement category? You create brand ambassadors and you create success stories. Uh, how do you create success stories around something that is as simple as cement? Uh, you create success stories by saying that these are the buildings in the last 2 years or 3 years that have been built using this particular brand of cement. And those are high quality buildings which have faced absolutely no issues, which then provides people with confidence and which then bumps your brand to the top of the pecking order when they end up making those purchase decisions or when they go through the process of purchase. So again, coming back to the purchase decision process, uh, what can you do if you are in a low involvement category? Um, the purchase process skips from need recognition to selection and then to the purchase decision and then to the post purchase evaluation. There are two things you can do as a brand. You can induce or increase the number of customers who go through the information search and evaluation of alternative stage. Basically, you move people or you move the category from being a low involvement category to being a high involvement category. The other thing that you can do is the selection and the purchase decision um, stage. You own these stages as a brand. So you don't give any breathing space to another brand to play in this particular stage, which is selection stage and purchase decision stage. And therefore end up gaining more and more market share in your particular category. So coming to owning the category, uh, my apologies for that particular clip art being out of space. Uh, we look at the classical 4P marketing mix. What can you do at a product front? You make the product become synonymous with the category. That is, you want the primary function of the need that you are trying to fulfill. For example, something from Pidilite itself. Uh, if you talk about instant glue, the very first thing that comes to your mind is Fevikwik. Um, so you basically own the category and therefore you earn more and more market share in this particular category. Price, in low involvement categories, you need to be competitively priced. That doesn't mean that you are the lowest price, but it also means that you are in the same ballpark as everybody else. Again, the example of Fevikwik, it's a 5 rupee price point that Fevikwik is playing around with. It's something that people can go and buy immediately without thinking too much about uh, what purchases they are making. Place, it has to be widely distributed. It has to be a high availability product and a high visibility product. Because this is one of those categories, or this is one of those areas, the low involvement categories, where what you can see sells. जो बिकता है, I mean, जो दिखता है वो बिकता है is something that is very true to low involvement categories, especially in a category like Fevikwik. So what is Fevikwik done? It is available at all Kirana stores, all large format stores, all modern trade stores, uh, across different categories of stores. So if you look at hardware stores, if you look at stationery shops, everywhere Fevikwik is available. How do you promote items in low involvement categories? You do it with mass promotion and you do it with targeted promotions. If it is a consumer brand, especially, then mass promotions are your primary way of promotion, and targeted promotions are your secondary ways of promotion. If it is something that is highly regulated, for example, prescription drugs, then you go with targeted promotions, wherein your decision makers are usually the doctors who end up being the influencers, and your customers and consumers don't have a lot of involvement in this category as such, but you end up playing around with the influencer. You ensure that your product is being prescribed by the influencers. So what has Fevikwik done? Advertisements on TV, print, and digital. Out of this, TV and print are mass promotion. Digital is a mix of mass promotion and targeted promotions, depending on the channels, etc. So I'll just give you one example of something that is owning the product feature that matters the most. This is an ad from Havells. Wires that don't catch fire is the tagline. This is a little old advertisements, but let's just go through it once. Right. So Havells, what they've done here, uh, they've taken their primary product feature, which is wires that don't catch fire, fireproof wires, and turned it into an advertisement, which is so hard hitting that anywhere you go, if your objective is to purchase wires that are fireproof, Havells is the very first name that comes to your mind. So the association between the product feature and the brand has become so strong that, like what I talked about Fevikwik, instant adhesive being Fevikwik, wires that don't catch fire are Havells. The other way of doing it is increasing customer involvement, which can be done with marketing in two ways. And any marketing anywhere in the world for any brand comes down to these two things. You either tell the customer what happens if you purchase or use the brand, or you tell the customer what happens if you don't purchase or use the brand. And this is true for any marketing communication that goes up. For things like, you know, deodorants to soaps to suitcases to social messaging campaigns. something that came out very recently was about cyber fraud from the different state governments and government of India, etc., which talks about what happens if you do something. What happens in this case is an inverse, which is a negative uh, reaction or a negative thing that happens to you. In case of most brands, what happens if you purchase or use the brand is something positive that they show. And similarly, what happens if you don't purchase or use a brand is something negative that happens. So we'll just look at a couple of examples in each of these categories. So what happens if you buy the brand? Classic series of ads by Santur, which have been using consistent messaging right from the 90s or even before that. So what has Santur tried to do here? They have tried to take a category that is low involvement or that was low involvement, like body soap, and turned it into a high involvement category. Uh, and their messaging is what happens if you buy the brand. If you buy and use Santur, you will look young even when you're not young. Very consistent messaging across ages. Something from Pidilite. This is a Fevicol uh, ad slash short film that came out for our 50 years. Okay. Sorry about those overlays, but I think the message is fairly clear. What happens if you buy and use Fevicol? Your furniture lasts for a long time. Like uh, we saw with Santur, the consistent brand imagery and the consistent messaging around the brand is also seen in the case of Fevicol. So Fevicol has also done the other thing, which is what happens if you don't use Fevicol. We'll just quickly go through a very short advertisement on that as Right. So here it's the inverse, which is what happens if you don't buy and use Fevicol. It ends up showing some damage being done to a person's reputation or to a person's money. Uh, that's what brands do mostly, which is either talk about what happens if you buy the brand or what happens if you don't buy the brand. So to end with, I will again come back to another quote by Scott Cook, uh, another brilliant marketer. A brand is no longer what we tell the consumer it is. It is what consumers tell each other it is. So we have moved a long way from classical advertising, classical branding, where organizations and brands were the ones who told the consumers what they were. We are quickly moving into an era where it is becoming less and less relevant. It is consumers who tell each other what the brand is. It is the consumers' lived experiences which are shaping the brand. You can obviously nudge it along the way with your marketing communications and advertisements, etc. But with democratization of internet and easy availability of information across the globe, this is the reality that we have to live with. This is the reality going forward, which is a brand, what it stands for, has changed over the last few years, and it has drastically changed over the last 10 years or so. And with that, I will end my presentation and I will take any questions that are there.
I think there are no questions. So, sir, thank you so much for your valuable insights and branding strategies for low involvement categories. On behalf of everyone here, thank you once again for an insightful session. And we look forward to staying connected and learning more from you in the future. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you.